Okay, good morning and welcome to day three of the 15th National Black Writers Conference. While, of course, this is 2020, so we're gathering virtually, and we thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Professor Wallace Ford. I teach in the Department of Public Administration at Medgar Evers College, and I'm also the author of the Point of View contemporary commentary blog that is now read in some 60 countries. You're invited to check it out at thewallaceford.com. I'm certainly delighted to be your host for today's program. And we kick off today's program with a very exciting town hall conversation. The subject is the role of the media, critics, and reviewers on Black plays and film, a very timely topic indeed. And this town hall is sponsored by Our Time Press. And ask you to please join me in welcoming our moderator, Bridget M. Davis, and the panelists, David Greaves, Pamela Newkirk, Marcia Pendleton, Lisa Cortez, and Vincent Cunningham. I would like to introduce at this time the moderator. As I said, Ms. Bridget Davis is the author of The World According to Fannie Davis, My Mother's Life in the Detroit Numbers. It was a New York Times Editor's Choice and named a Best Book of 2019 by Kirkus Reviews, NBC News, and BuzzFeed. She is also author of the novels Into the Go Slow, Shifting Through Neutral, and the writer-director of the award-winning feature film Naked Acts. She teaches journalism and creative writing at our sister CUNY school, Baruch College, and has written essays for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Real Simple, the LA Times, and Oprah Magazine. And you are invited to visit her website at bridgetdavis.com. That's BRIDGETTDAVIS.com. With that, please join me in welcoming Sister Bridget Davis. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Wallace, for that lovely introduction. I too want to welcome all of you here today for this incredible town hall on the role of media critics and reviewers on Black plays and film. I'm so excited to have such an esteemed group of panelists that'll be in conversation today about this really vital subject. And so what I thought we would do is we would go around and let each panelist introduce him or herself and tell us a little bit about their professional lives. And then I'm going to toss out the first question to get us started, and each panelist can respond after introducing him or herself. And that first question will be, what's your relationship to criticism? And what do you see as its role? What's your relationship to criticism? And what do you see as its role? So to start us off, I'm going to first introduce Vincent Cunningham. Welcome, Vincent.
Hi, Bridget. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
Um,
Tell us about yourself.
sure. Well, as you said, my name is Vincent Cunningham. I am a staff writer and the theater critic, or one of the two theater critics at the New Yorker magazine. And I've been with the New Yorker since, I guess, 2016 or something like that. It's interesting. Criticism serves a lot of functions for me, but the big thing is that I think all art, at the end of the day, is about encounter. It's about a kind of communication, and I don't think that art is finished until it meets people and interacts with their senses. And so the critic is, I think, the person who ushers the art out into the world and helps to create that encounter. And so in some ways, enacts that encounter, shows what happens when art touches an individual mind. So that's really important. In some ways, you're acting as a proxy for the person who will eventually see the art. And then I think that there's something even more interesting or profound happens when it's theater, which I work with a lot, which is, the fact is a lot of people aren't going to see the plays that you write about. Right. Not everybody lives in New York where Broadway is or off Broadway. And a lot of times you're writing about things that someone will never see, even if they're interested in the theater. So in some ways you are putting on a performance, it's like the jazz thing of taking a melody and then doing your own improvisations on it. And you're putting on the show in some ways, singing the song for the person who won't get to see the original. So you're acting in this really important intermediary role. So there's a lot more to say about it, but I think that's a good place to start.
That's fantastic. That makes me want to bring in our next panelist right away to give us another perspective from that of the creator producer, and that's Lisa Cortez. Hello, Lisa. Welcome.
Good day, Bridget. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Happy to be
Good.
here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and I understand you have something really wonderful to share with us too, a clip.
Yes. My name is Lisa Cortez. I'm a film producer and director. Some of the projects I've been involved with as a producer are Precious, The Woodsman, the Apollo Theater documentary, and most recently, All In, The Fight for Democracy, which I directed and produced along with Liz Garbus and the incredible Stacey Abrams. So I'd love to share a clip from, a very short clip from All In.
Fantastic.
Turnout is the best remedy to voter suppression.
Y'all already been out to vote? We need everybody out there in droves.
My goodness, that couldn't be more timely, Lisa.
Well, I think all eyes are on Georgia.
Yep.
All In is the history of voter suppression and voting rights in the US, and its intersection with the personal journey of Stacey Abrams. To be able to tell this history, but also center it through the eyes of a Black woman, was really exciting for me as a filmmaker. It's funny when you talk about criticism, obviously, the difference with films as opposed to theater is when you open up these days, yes, we were at drive-ins, but then, the film is on Amazon Prime. So, and it's available worldwide. And so the traffic that you get, the life of your project is really generated by a positive critical response. Because I think there's so much content being offered that people are like, okay, I've got 10 things I can watch on Friday, which review excites me the most. So certainly it's something that's important for us, particularly with the platform and the competition for eyeballs that's out there. But I do think it's important that people differentiate between actual critics and opinion sites, because there's a lot of people who have opinions, but do not present with a critical framing. I have a very funny story. There's a site called Rotten Tomatoes, which is a review aggregator website. So our film is, it's 100% certified. All the major critics have reviewed it and loved it. We have an 8 out of 10. But then the audience score is at 64%. So you go, how can you have all these great critical reviews and the audience score is low? Well, what we've discovered is that, this film touches a nerve with people who want to believe that voter suppression isn't real. We've had critics or people's opinions who have furthered a conversation that it advances a pro-abortion platform, which is nothing, that's not a part of the film at all. So it's so interesting, and I always say it's important when people are looking for information about films to be careful of who is curating it, and whether it is the criticism comes from a verified source. Because I think this is an interesting example of, if you were to look at it and you'd say, oh, the audience score isn't happening, maybe this isn't quality material. But what was ultimately for us as filmmakers with All In is we welcome and the support that we have, but we've also done a lot to meet people where they are. We made this film to educate people about this history and to hopefully stoke in their bellies righteous indignation and the desire to engage in the process. So, I'm very happy with the critical response we've had. I'm more inspired by the young person who came to our pop-up registration screening bus tour and said, I was apathetic, but now I'm going to vote. And yes, you want that acceptance, but this film is a call to action. And we believe that the information presented and the education has been really helpful to many communities that had been victimized and had become apathetic.
Right. Wow. It sounds like you're saying there are times when it's not really necessarily about the criticism, that it's about the way art creates or generates a movement. I really want to bring Pamela Newkirk into the discussion. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Thank you, Wallace, and my fellow panelists. It's such an honor to be on such an esteemed, with such an esteemed group of scholars and critics and filmmakers. It's amazing. And I also want to just thank the Center for Black Literature. I've been so fortunate to have the support of the center throughout my career as an author. My first book was published 20 years ago within the Veil, Black Journalists, White Media, which was a work of media criticism. And it looked at how race overtly and covertly, how the racial dynamic in the newsroom affects what we see in the news media. And that book continues to be read at universities across the country, and it's still relevant because there's still this acute underrepresentation of people of color, and particularly of African Americans. The number of Black journalists has actually gone down over the past 10 years. We're heading in the wrong direction where race in the media is concerned. And then my last book, Diversity Inc., The Failed Promise of a $1 Billion Business, one of the industries that I look at is Hollywood. And again, looking at this radical underrepresentation of people of color working as directors and filmmakers and behind the scenes, behind the camera. So we're looking at this underrepresentation of, particularly I looked at African Americans, to see Lisa Cortez. I'm so delighted to see her, but she represents such a small percentage of the people who are actually able to do this work in Hollywood. We saw that movement, Oscar So White, highlight this acute underrepresentation of Blacks and how the impact that has on the films that we see, the films that we don't see, who's getting nominated, So my work has always concerned itself with not only representation in terms of numbers and impact, but also the portrayals of African American people.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So given your understanding of the dearth of diversity within these various industries, from Hollywood to journalism, tell us, what do you feel the role is of the critic, given that landscape you've described?
Yeah, well, see, when you have this kind of, I would say, perverse underrepresentation, it distorts, how these films are being received. There was a study released by the USC, University of Southern California, 2 years ago. It was called Critics' Choice. And it looked at some 20 1,000 reviews of the 100 top films in 2017 and found that 82% were written by white critics. And, you know, when people of color are like 40% of the US population, why are 82% of the reviews being written by white critics? And we already know that it goes through a different kind of prism, right? Because of the way race determines the pictures we see and how we see them and all of that. So yeah, so we're seeing how critics can also influence what films get made, right? Because
Right.
you know the industry is looking at what succeeds, what doesn't succeed, and criticism has a huge impact
Mhm.
on the future success of filmmakers. And so when you have this kind of underrepresentation of people of color, you're also going to see the ripple effects of that underrepresentation.
Oh, those numbers are startling, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like you
And
have to accept it when you see it in black and white.
right. And the numbers get even worse when you look at, you know, the percentage of directors, the percentage of like that are Black, you know, it's under like 10%. And when you look at who gets to write screenplays, who gets to, you know, put a play on Broadway, the numbers are even worse and more sobering than I had anticipated when I started researching diversity. And because it was kind of inspired by what I had seen throughout my own career. I've been on the faculty at New York University for 27 years. And for all of that time, there was this rhetoric around diversity and the importance of diversity. And yet the numbers, the needle hadn't moved in all of that time. African Americans are only, what is it, like 4% of university professors, and that includes professors at historically Black colleges and universities. And so why is there this, you know, persistent conversation around the need for diversity, and why are billions of dollars expended every year on diversity initiatives? And all of these industries, all of these institutions are spending so much money on it, and yet the needle isn't moving. So that is what I went into the project trying to interrogate, the tension between the billions expended on diversity year after year, the constant rhetoric around, you know, the need for it,
Mhm.
and the lack of diversity in all of these fields.
It makes us grateful for both Vincent and Lisa, who are in industries representing, their presence is a sliver of a sliver,
And
which
so
means
is and so is yours, Bridget, on a faculty.
yeah, I had no idea it was that small, but I
Yes,
can tell you
we're all,
stories. So
yeah, we're all unicorns. I
yeah,
mean,
we're all unicorns. This really makes me want to bring Marcia Pendleton in. Hello, Marcia.
Hello, how are you? It's good to see
Great.
you. It's good to see
Welcome.
everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's feel free to jump into this conversation.
Okay, great. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm Marcia Pendleton. I am the founder and president of Walk Tall Girl Productions. It is a boutique marketing, audience development, and group sales agency for the performing arts with a special emphasis placed on the theater. I have and continue to work with Broadway productions, off-Broadway productions, national tours, um, projects that wish to go to Broadway. So in the next few weeks, I will be starting a new chapter of my life and continuing to do the work that I do as a promotion specialist. I will be hosting and producing a radio show on WBAI called Backstage Stories, where people can get behind the scenes information. I'm glad that I'm on this panel because I will be calling on all of you to be a guest, good, to be a guest on the show. I am going to answer your question coming from a marketer's perspective. Critical review can mean that the box office can sing if the reviews are good, but it can also kill a show as well if the reviews are poor. And because we have so few people of color doing critical review, we've had to go through a process of trying to critic-proof shows. And if you don't have the investment to do that, then the show will die. You know, it will die. I have found that when I was in graduate school and doing research, I found that critical review helped give me a contemporaneous view of what was going on at the time, you know, with the work. But today, critical review also enables people to make a decision about what it is that they wish to see, how they want to spend their time. Another thing that critical review does, it gives us content in order to continue to promote the show, especially you use the content if it's great. So-and-so from so-and-so says that this is a must-see, so we use that. But critical review is also used to move a production from off-Broadway to Broadway. You need that to build your portfolio for your investors to move the show from one place to another. So that's what critical review means to me as a marketer, but it also means the same to people who are producing the work as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think we have another panelist that has joined us. Yes? Is that you, David? Yes. I believe you're still on mute. This is David Greaves. Yeah, we just need you off mute. I think it's coming soon, guys.
There, how's that?
Hello, welcome.
Oh, so sorry I'm late.
That's okay. We're happy to have you. This is David Greaves, everyone. I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to ask you to answer the same question I've been giving to the other panelists, which is simply, what's your relationship to criticism, and what do you see as its role?
Okay, well, gee, I'm publisher, co-publisher of Our Time Press with my wife, Bernice Green, and we started it 25 years ago. And it is now a weekly publication here in Brooklyn. We print 20,000 copies a week. And so that's what's happening now. Previously, I was in film production. I've done work with film. And so frankly, we can go directly to the question, which is criticism.
Yes. What do you see?
I don't like it.
You don't like it? Did you say you don't like it?
No, my relation to criticism, well, certainly with the paper, what happened? What happened? Oh,
You're
there
back.
we are.
You're back.
Yeah. My relation, in terms of the paper and criticism, my main critic is my wife, Bernice. And so we go back and forth in terms of what it is that we do, in putting out the paper, and criticism is kind of a mutual back and forth in terms of we do get some outside criticism. I'm trying to think of folks say you should be covering this more or should be covering that more. Why aren't you folks doing this? That kind of thing. And basically, we're sort of constrained by the number of pages that we have, the amount of space that we have, the amount of space that's quite frankly paid for. And so we're constrained in that aspect. And then also a lot of things, we are mostly, we're very community oriented, so that we don't really cover at this point. We don't cover like, wait, why does it keep doing this? I'm sorry, are you back again?
That's okay. Well, you're back.
Okay. Yeah. So, yes, right. So, in terms of outside criticism, we really, quite frankly, don't have much except in terms of what it is that we cover, which is, and sometimes folks may take exception to some of the opinions that are in the paper, and that's all. You know, that's valid. Everybody can have their opinion, and then we're fine with that.
Does the paper cover arts criticism? What's its coverage of arts criticism?
For arts criticism, no. We used to have Linda Armstrong used to be our media, if you will, theater critic. But as of now, we don't really do art criticism, to be honest with you. We're sort of very on the ground paper, and so we don't really go into the art criticism area as much. If we were a larger paper, then we may do that. But as of now, certainly, we just don't have the space to cover it when we're really trying to cover what's happening on the ground in the community.
I see. Thank you so much.
Sure.
In the time we have left, I'm going to throw out this next question, which is really speaking to what so many of you have addressed, which is this whole idea of how we get more diverse voices into the field of criticism. I thought I would ask Vincent, as the critic in the group, a slightly tough question. You're hearing that these Black creators and artists really depend on criticism to help elevate their work and provide a platform and an audience. You must get this question often, but how do you handle your role as a Black critic? Like, what are you thinking in terms of the need, you know, being true to your craft, etc.?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because coming in that there is a sort of special challenge for creators who are Black, and that attention, as Marcia mentioned, is so much a part of it that people, but then you also have these imperatives and prerogatives of your own interest, right? And usually, the community out of which you come is a constituent part of your interest. So I'm interested in Black people and Black stuff because these are the people who have made me up, right? And criticism implies membership in a community, right? That Black art has created my interest, has created my tastes, has created my loves, right? And criticism, among other things, is an expression of a kind of love. But another thing can happen, right? So, and this is one of the weird incentives of many publications, is that you hire somebody Black, you hire somebody from any community, and then you only give them things to review or talk about or be interested in that are sort of representative of your interests. So then you become like the sort of, the Black Bard of the New York Times or the Black Bard of the New Yorker, right? You become sort of, this is what you write about, So you have to fight against that because you want to, just like a Black creator wants to create whatever they want to do and not just be called on to be like, can you write us another civil rights thing, please, right? Like we all want a kind of freedom in our expression. Same thing goes for criticism. You want to broaden and think about everything. So the answer, I think, just as in politics, is not to think about necessarily individuals, even though each of us is trying to do what we can to sort of meet that moment, meet that challenge, meet these prerogatives, but to continue to keep a systemic and industry-wide critique that says, no, if you have enough people who have this breadth of interest, if you bring in enough critics from different communities, then, kind of naturally, everybody following their interests, more and more people will be able to get their work looked at. And that sort of economy can come into view, because the fact is that no critic can shoulder the responsibility of a whole ecosystem of artists without becoming a kind of machine, right? And we all want to, all of us, what we really want is the freedom to create out of, again, those loves that have made us up. That's what we all want.
And that's so interesting that you say that, because, you know, what you're describing is what white critics have.
Yeah.
The freedom to write across so many different genres and, you know, interests, and, you know, the freedom to do that. You should not be pigeonholed to do only one thing, while white critics get to write about whatever you know, moves them. And that's part of the burden that's placed on people of color in this society, right? It's like these limitations, these boxes that you're just put in. And so there's that paradox, because on the one hand, you do want to write about Black people. Like, I know as a writer, I want to write about Black people, but I also can write about all kind of people because I'm a journalist, right? And my curiosity is not limited to just one community. I can write broadly about many different things, and I shouldn't have that, you know, that burden to only write about this one thing. So you're describing just freedom that white journalists and white critics just naturally have.
Yeah, nobody hires a white correspondent, you know, nobody hires a, you know, I'm going to cover the white theater. Nobody,
precisely, yeah,
nobody's worried about that, you know. So it's this weird paradox. But hopefully, another thing that criticism can do is, you know, part of the work of criticism is to bring histories into mind. So when you are looking at something, one of the great tools of criticism is to make analogy. Like, this reminds me of this old thing, you know. Weirdly, this year, because there hasn't been much live theater, I've been able to do a lot of columns about lost plays that people don't think about anymore. So I wrote a column about the plays of Kathleen Collins that that we have now gotten, people have gotten introduced to her movies. Now it's like, oh, she's got plays, you know, looking at some unproduced plays of Jean Toomer's. And so hopefully can also become a correspondence between someone like me and then producers, so that they can sort of bring new things into view and maybe take some of that burden too. I was really, really happy. So I wrote this Kathleen Collins thing in April, and I just learned that the Oakland Theater Project is going to put on a program of some of those plays. I don't know if I haven't talked to them. I don't know if I should take a little bit of credit for that or not, but it's like, oh,
probably
there is a correspondence, you know, that critics are sort of also casting things back into the world, and hopefully people on the other side of that divide, you know, people who make things happen, can sort of start to fill in areas, so that no person is feeling like they need to fill the void. What we are trying to do is be in community with one another.
Right, beautifully said. All right, so let's talk about what could be actual practical ways to create more diversity, because that is seemingly the solution. No one critic has to do everything for everyone in his or her community. It may seem like the obvious answer is to simply hire more.
That's it.
Right?
That's
but, you know, I'll use this example. The New York Times, the long-standing theater critic, recently retired. There's been talk and chatter out there about the idea that you never again put one critic in a position like that as a full-time staffer who is then charged with covering, say, the theater industry, and instead maybe rotate that position with various critics so that you begin to get this complement of voices. What do you guys think about? Like, that's one idea.
Yeah.
What do you think about, you know, this idea of one critic at a paper of record covering the industry for decades?
It's problematic for for obvious reasons, right? Yeah, we need multiple voices and visions and perspectives. You know, we're this multiracial society in which the voices 40% of the population has been muted, you know, across every single field. And so when it comes to criticism, it becomes even more important to have, you know, these different voices that are, you know, looking at art, looking at, you know, the way the world is represented. And it's not just in the United States. These are representations that travel around the world and inform how people are looking at African Americans, at Latinos, at, you know, art it does more than just express, you know, beauty and love. It's actually informing how people are viewed on the street when they walk through the streets of Paris or, you know, wherever you go. You're taking along with you. Hollywood has had a profound impact on the way people are viewed, and you know, in the way African Americans in particular are viewed.
Right.
And so it's, you know, people think it's just like, oh, it's just art, or it's just criticism, it's just a movie. But when you look at 100 years of history of Hollywood and you see the way people have been represented over time, it does shape views in the way
absolutely.
people are looking at us, right? And our humanity becomes questioned based on, you know, the patterns that we see in the way that we're represented. So you can't look at it in a vacuum. When you look at the history and the legacy of race in film, if you just look at film, it's profound. You know, if you look at, you know, what gets made and what doesn't get made, there are clear patterns that be quantified, right?
Yeah. So Lisa, what do you think might be a practical approach or solution to this lack of diversity amongst critics out in these major publications and media outlets?
You know, it's a very challenging answer. And I'm completely in agreement with Pamela and Vincent about the landscape we look in. And, you know, I think a lot of organizations pat themselves on the back because they have someone and not realizing
someone
that, you know, we're not monolithic, you know, and one person of color, you know, cannot and should not be taxed with being the prism to dissect, you know, all of the material from our community. I mean, you know, in film, there is the African American Film Critics Association, which I know has been doing a lot to support and mentor, you know, because and Film at Lincoln Center has also been doing some important work to introduce new voices and support them. Because, you know, this barrier to entry, you know, is economic also. And so progress is happening very slowly. We are in an interesting time where many decision makers are claiming a woke sash. And it certainly is a time to continue the conversation and to figure out what a real constructive measures for the talent that's there to have a seat at the table, but also be able to afford to be at that table. You know, it isn't something that's a hobby. It is a serious craft. And, you know, the economic support for these critical voices as they begin their careers is something we have to look at in the film industry and support. So once again, I cycle back to Gil Robertson's work with the African American film critics. And, you know, I think certainly the light that's been shown by people like Tambay Benson, you know, at IndieWire, and the scope of his scholarship is amazing. And I think it's like, as oftentimes happens, with Black folks, is we have to show them, we have to prove our relevance. And I think for all of us in the creative community, we have to support these voices that are expanding the dialogue and the critical voices.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think with Tambe Oberson, that's a great example. He launched that site on his own before it built across time, right? And so I'm wondering, is that something?
Well,
oh, go ahead.
He launched Shadow and Act.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He launched Shadow and Act, and then IndieWire took it over. And so it's like the genesis was his passion for it and creating a space, right, for it to grow and evolve. And so I'm just wondering, for instance, Marcia, do you see a role that Black press or, individual Black journalists who want to just create these spaces for art, do you see a role there? I mean, I know that has a financial fragility built into it, but have you found that's been a source of support for your artistic life?
There are a couple of things. With the racial reckoning, there have been organizations that have grown out of that in the Black theater community in particular. With the exception of BTN, the Black Theater Network, I'm on the board of directors for that organization. It is an advocacy organization, but we've been around for over 30 years. But some of the newer organizations like the Broadway Advocacy Coalition and Black Theater United and White Theaters, We See You, they have actually pushed organizations to increase diversity, and also pushing organizations to increase the employment of people who do critical review. In terms of the way that I have worked with Black journalists in the past, and I continue to work with them, is to have them write articles that or create opportunities for us to be heard, to give us information, background information. When Vincent was talking about what he was doing, I love that, for that to happen, because that's how people find out what's going on behind the scenes. Also with the advertising, and that's money. That's money. It's the advertising. Where do you invest? When I first started working in New York 20 years ago, people wanted a silver bullet in terms of how you would reach Black audiences. There's no silver bullet. You have to make the investment. You have to look at how we live our lives, whether that be on the ground and having a booth at the International African Arts Festival where you can actually put something in people's hands, or whether you make the investment in smaller websites. I began to see the connection between theater and film when film actors, people that we now know as film actors, I know them from their work in New York theater, and connecting them with websites like, or blogs and publications like Shadow and Act, so people could find out that their favorite film actors are actually people who started off in the theater. One of the people that that was missing from all the accolades about the late Chadwick Boseman was that he was a beast in the New York theater community before he became this huge Hollywood star. So hopefully all of that will answer your question. There are so many layers
Yeah.
that we need to address in terms of getting our stories out there, but also working on Broadway for the last 20 years. I hate it when people are so consumed with creating something that will just please the critic of the New York Times. We have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond that because some of the people that you're trying to reach don't necessarily read the New York Times. We get our information from other places. So what they're talking about, I hope when they replace Ben Brantley, it will be a person of color, or they will rotate, because there's so much that we can get from a wide range of voices.
Thank you. I was just going to say, we're really scratching the surface because these are such complex issues. I do want to keep the town hall part of this in place. So I am going to open it up to Q&A. Because we are a webinar on Zoom, there is the possibility and potential for individuals to ask their questions directly. They can have their mics turned on. So I'm just going to get started. And the first question is from Sandra Adele. Sandra, do you want to ask this live? I'm not sure how I will find out if the answer is yes or no. Let's see. Not sure. So I'm going to read it. Sandra says, what do we as educators need to do to help find and train African Americans as critics and reviewers, considering that the financial rewards are so small? It's a great question. Great question. I'm going to ask Vincent about that. Like, is mentoring part of what you see your role as?
Sure. I mean, it's an interesting issue because I think people misunderstand what it takes to be a critic. I think they think that you have to be some sort of PhD level scholar. There's there's this imposing amount of expertise that you have to have. Well, really, you have to have some knowledge. You have to care about the medium, but really, you have to be a person who can write and notices well. And that really is the criterion. Somebody who is curious and can write. And so I teach at a Masters of Fine Arts program in writing, and I'm often in my classes are people who are fiction writers, want to write novels, or want to be poets, or want to be nonfiction journalists, or write essays. And I always say, when somebody can write and is interesting when they talk about art, I was like, you should write criticism. And so that's what we can do, I think, is that anybody who is interested in writing, often they don't think about criticism because they think that that's this corner. I started writing criticism while I was trying to write a novel. I still am, so it's not like this corner that you can be put into. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting is, like, now my friends who are novelists, who are well known in other fields, want to know, okay, how can I get published in the New Yorker? How can I do criticism? How can I do other things? And because often, especially MFA training, sort of specializes you. You're off, you go to Iowa, you go someplace, and you just, you work on the craft of fiction, and it doesn't occur to you until, you're between books and you still want to be publishing. And it's like, this is a muscle that anybody can kind of exercise, whether it's, pitching to places, to sort of glossy magazines, or it's, doing it on your own. There are people who, there's a podcast, it's two people of color, it's called Theater Friends, and they do a podcast, and now they write all over the place, because obviously we're in this moment of newsletters and podcasts, people doing things on their own. So you can be exercising those muscles at any time, and sort of finding your way through it. I've had students who are poets, now they are sort of fine art critics. They review painting exhibitions and things like that, just because somebody said, hey, you could do that. So I think that's the big thing for us who work with students, just showing them this is an area of possibility. You know, I started off doing 400-word theater reviews at the Brooklyn paper, a very small sort of community news group, and just because I wanted to be writing and have my name out there. So
Right.
It can be a supplement to another career. It doesn't have to be, you know, a sort of this big lane. So that aspect of just encouragement is I think really important.
I'd also like to encourage people to reach out to the National Association of Black Journalists, because I do know that they have an arts and entertainment committee. And I also do know that they have an extensive mentorship program. So that may be a place to start with people. I have found my most fruitful relationships with Black media through NABJ.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Sorry, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of getting using your craft and getting it out there, I must say I like hearing about these new podcasts and websites, self-created, because that seems to me to be the low bar to get your work out there and to exercise that muscle that Vinny was talking about before you, if you will, really get into the print side, because on the print side, then there's a much higher bar in terms of the cost of getting the word out there. So I'm frankly, I'm very encouraged hearing about these online new efforts that people are using, because that's where, for example, as we're going through the net, we may see things that are interesting, say, oh, okay, let's see if we can use this, or let's see if we can use that. And we'll contact the person, send them $50 or something like that to use the work. But so I like the idea of exercising first over the internet with that low cost bar before you really go to the print side, because then you'll have a body of work that you can show, and then a publisher or producer will say, okay, we'll in effect spend the money to have you in the paper or the magazine, etc.
But I think what you said, Bridget, about mentoring is really key. And also what Vincent is saying, it is a craft. And so it's something that you have to really hone over time. You know, it's
Exactly.
a muscle, right? That you have to really work on. You can't just say, I want to do it. You have to like really, really apply yourself to what it takes in the writing and, you know, a demonstrated passion, whether it's for film or art or whatever it is. Like you have to like really just hone all the muscles that you'll need to be good at what you're doing. Because, you know, Vincent said he was doing it at the Brooklyn paper. Yeah, start at a low level, but start at a place where you can also get input and someone is helping you develop all the skills that you'll need to eventually make it to a place like the New Yorker.
And this next question, thank you for that, Pamela. This next question is sort of related. It's asking, how can Black critical thought, this comes from Gray Jones, by the way, how can Black critical thought about art become a niche yet profitable market? Yeah. How can you get the support, the financial support for something that's identifying itself as a clearly sort of focused medium on criticism about Black art?
But that's been the challenge of Black journalists since 1827, when Freedom's Journal was founded, right? How do you support the mission, you know, support the work of journalism, of Black thought? that's always been a challenge. And I think now you do have more ways to do it because of the internet, lower cost, to enter into that space. But, the challenge of finding ways to get the economic support that's always going to be a challenge, not just for African Americans, but for anyone who wants to publish.
Mhm. Yeah.
For
So
me,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say that for me, and you're right, it is as in mentioned Freedom Journal, their thing was that, gee, they didn't have the advertising to support what it is that they wanted to do and to support the criticism, if you will, section. We, for us, yeah, we don't get the advertising support from, say, for example, publishers or movie producers, plays, that kind of thing. And if we had that, then certainly we could have a critic section, if you will, in the paper. But without that advertising support, there's really not a way for us to do that easily. We have, just because we're constrained economically. And so, yeah, it is important to, when you have the opportunity, to, if you're doing a play, if you're doing a film, if you're writing a book, to have your sponsor, your publisher, your producer, whoever, ask them to take advertising out in the local, if you will, in the local papers, and then they can, in fact, return that support to you and the production.
But say, for instance, David, someone came to you, someone really, maybe one of Vincent's students,
Mm-hmm.
and said, I'm willing to volunteer or for very little money, just for the opportunity for a platform, write reviews for your publication as a way to hone his or her craft, and also to really give some actual critique to works that are maybe falling through the cracks, because that's the other thing we haven't really spoken about. There's so much art out there being produced by African Americans that doesn't get any critique because it's just a limitation of venues and critics really who maybe are overlooking or unable to focus on that work. So what do you say about that?
Frankly, I tell them we're not interested. I'll be honest with you. We tell them we're not interested. If you want to write about a community event, if you want to write about something that's happening in the community, if you want to write about something like that, it is because we have to look at the, if you will, the on the ground folks and what is that they're interested in. And the idea of just contributing content. It's, yes, you can contribute content, but we have plenty of content. We have too much content available to us. And we think that it is more important for us at this time to get to the, if you will, the grassroots folks and what it is that they're interested in, their daily lives, health, welfare, whatever it is. That's where we have to put our focus. We can't put our focus on every, as you say, there's plenty of folks who want to say, and we've had those calls, gee, let me do this, let me do that, and we just can't. If they say, okay, we want to look at this church and what is that they're doing, then that's a different thing. If you're looking at community issues, that's something that we can, that we'll say, okay, you can write about that. If they say, well, there's a play opening and we'd like to write about that, that isn't where our center is. It just is not.
Okay, that's fair and honest. Vincent?
No, I was going to say, in sort of piggybacking on that, one of the things, speaking of the Brooklyn paper, that I learned to do is when they didn't have space for a review, we're not doing that right now, figuring out, okay, so there's an arts event that's happening in the community. One thing that people need to do as they are thinking about their because their toolbox as a writer is to learn how to report. So, okay, I can't review the thing, but there's going to be a community event around it. Can I call the person who's organizing the event? Can I call one of the artists who's going to be in the community? Somebody, you know, and learning the skill of report, like arts reporting, which many arts critics have in their toolkit, you know, to learn that. That might be the no from David might be an opportunity to pitch a sort of arts piece that's grounded in the community, but, you know, can still put you in a place where you're writing about the arts. You know, that might be, you know, that might be your next move after David says no thanks, you know.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. You're absolutely right. If you've got and we have done that, where folks say they want to write about, gee, with something's happening at Billie Holiday, and you know, it's rooted in the community, and we certainly have had that in there. You know, we've done several things with the Billie Holiday Theater. You know, we're working with them. On the other side, I have to tell you, they also advertise with us. You know, so it's a sort of a mutual relationship. And so we've had a number of things with, I forget the person in charge there, but we've done a number of things with them, and that's worked out very well. And also with, so I like the idea, and what Vinny's talking about is that if there's a community event that's taking place and it involves folks down on the ground there, yeah, sure, we're absolutely open to that.
Okay, I have another question. Really, Lisa, I'm wondering what you might think about this question. Knowing that race can influence perspective, is there ever any skepticism on your part when you read a review of a Black production by a white critic?
Certainly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so much of criticism comes from learned experience. And particularly with stories that are a part of our DNA and so specific, I think there have been moments where there's been an egregious misreading of the text, of the context, of the history. And so that's the conundrum we're in. You know, we live and die, you know, by the critical response. Yet at the same time, as I mentioned at the top, I think we also, you know, myself as a producer and as director, I'm always keenly aware of, one, the engagement of people of color on the marketing team, and two, my personal outreach. And the most important is to meet the community where it is, and to find modes, particularly in your marketing, and probably Marcia could talk to this also, of where you know, your marketing can't just depend on the typical approach that the company that you work with might have. Because it might not touch upon the audiences that you want to reach. I don't know, Marcia, do you find that's a big part of like how you've been educating?
That's definitely a big part of it. It's, you have to educate who you are working with in terms of getting the word out, and you also have to educate the community as well. When David was talking about the mutual investment between the Billie Holiday Theater, which is under the direction of Dr. Indira Edwaru, and the paper, that's so important. A lot of the producers that I have worked with completely missed that. The fact that maybe you do need to invest in the Amsterdam News or the New York Beacon to make sure that that ad also brings you editorial exposure. That's where people are getting their information. I noticed that when producers made the connection that the Black church as a source of audience building without understanding that the Black church is not a monolith, you know, and how you just can't call up somebody and say, hey, can I bring this person to your worship service so they can sing and promote our show? No, it doesn't work like that. You have to have people on board who have this knowledge base of the community that nobody else has. And then also people need to be willing to make the investment. I have had experiences where small off-Broadway shows that the writers really did write this for Black audiences, but not necessarily for the subscription-based audience. But you just can't give me $2,500, $3,000 to reach this broader audience. So marketing is essential, and having those marketing specialists in place who have that knowledge, not just the science of marketing, but also the relationship building that goes with marketing. That is necessary. And that's how you also, no offense to Vincent, but that's how you can critic-proof your work, by getting the word out there. Because somebody doesn't like it, but somebody who has been in the audience early on that says, nah, I really like that show. You should take your mother, you should take your father, you should take your daughter to that show. Don't listen to what that person says. This is about us, so you should go see it.
And a good example of that is The Best Man. It was not marketed as a Black film. It was marketed to a wide audience, and as a result became a #1 film, even though some critics said that it was a race-themed film when it wasn't about race. It's like, just because it has Black characters doesn't make it a race-themed film. So yeah, there are all of these, as you said, Bridget, is so complicated, because another aspect of this that we didn't touch on is like the boards of the theaters. Who's on those boards?
Yes.
Who gets to determine like what gets on Broadway? Like, where's the money coming from? And so there are all of these things that, you know, prevent the voices of, you know, Black creatives to be widely shared.
Well, here's a slightly more delicate question. What happens when you're unhappy with what a Black critic wrote about work you believe deserves an audience? It's a delicate balancing act, right? But I feel it's important to throw that out there too, right?
But we're not monolithic, right? So the Black critic can't speak for every single Black person. The Black critic has a perspective that is her or his own. And so we can't, like, it goes back to that burden that Vincent was talking about earlier. It's like, you can't speak for everyone, and you shouldn't be expected to.
But Vincent, has anyone ever rolled up on you little unhappy? I mean, honestly though, even though you do deserve to just be the best critic you know to be and be true to that craft, also, you know, we all know about our two warring souls, right? And so, of course, you must also have in your head, you write for the New Yorker, so the impact is going to be profound. So how do you deal with that?
Well, you know, there's a couple of things. It starts with your own craft. I mean, criticism means lots of different things to a lot of different people, you know? And a lot of people do write in a sort of up or down, don't go see this, go see this way. I mean, I'm always just trying to respond to things. And see what they look like next to the world that I live in, you know? Sometimes though, that means I really, really dislike something, and sometimes something will get me upset or something like that, and that'll come through in the writing. Sure, I mean, I've run into people that I like negatively, and they we'll have a conversation, and we have to. There is a such thing as authority in criticism, but it doesn't mean that it's not authoritarianism. I'm not the last word. It's a conversation. Like you should, if it really bothers you, you should. Everybody now has all of these tools to get their perspective out, and people should use those. But to what we were saying, it's a little bit less at the New Yorker because of our tradition of criticism writ large. We are a little bit less of that arbiter. I mean, in the theater, unfortunately, just because of the dynamics, it really has become the Times. Like everybody waits for the Times review, and then that has this, especially in the performing arts, this incredibly oversized, determinative power. Like we can shut the show down or whatever. I mean, that wasn't good in the heyday when that was at the height of its power. And it's those stories about Frank Rich just ripping things apart, and then the next day they close, and it's not good now. That's not healthy. As a this is a conversation. So yeah, what you should do if you don't like it is talk to. I've gotten emails from people, and great, now we know each other, and but it is on there is a difference between being unfair or cruel and disliking something, right? So if somebody's been cruel or they're spiteful, then that brings that wall back into. But if you just purely disagree, or you say, there was a question about is there skepticism if a white critic doesn't get a Black piece of art or something, but sometimes, as Marcia said, we're not a monolith. I grew up, my mom taking me to a Pentecostal church, and somebody else might go. There are many Black experiences that I, as a Black reviewer, still might not get. So if there's something that I missed, that's great. Now I'm learning. Now the next thing that you do, I'll be able to say, here's where this is coming from. And even if I don't love it still, I can bring in those things of, okay, here's what this is speaking to. So much of what criticism is building a system of references. Okay, this is what this is talking to. This is where this is why this exists. This is the tradition out of which this person comes. Everybody can know all of those things, but getting better at criticism is widening your frame of reference. So that conversation can help.
Yeah, it makes me think about how Lisa started out by saying there's this distinction between opinion and criticism, and widening your lens and having references and contextualizing the work seems like the heart of really valuable criticism. But we are in an up and down kind of culture, right?
Yeah.
Well, Bridget?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. I've been reminded that since Our Time Press was a sponsor, I'd like to just put just a slight commercial.
Sure.
That folks could go to ourtimepress.com and see what is that we do, or they can email us at editors@ourtimepress.com, and that's where we'll look to see what folks want to say and want to see in the paper, that kind of thing. So I'll just put that out there very quickly before my phone runs out of power.
Okay, thank you, David. So Lisa, just do you have any thoughts about how someone who's listening and wants to become a serious critic can navigate this whole distinction between what we often think naively criticism is, which is basically expressing your opinion?
I think there's multiple steps. First is doing the work. I meet a lot of people who are critics in their head, and God bless them. But you've wherever you find an outlet, maybe you start a vlog. You've got to do the work. I also think, though, when it comes to film and the arts, it is important. It's an educational process that never ends, to be aware of variety of films and not to pigeonhole yourself into just one genre. Because I do think that the critics I respond to are contextualizing and framing their conversation based on a knowledge of cinema, of arts movements, of, how does the conversation in the film fit into a history? Right. And how is it moving the engagement that we have forward? So that's, I feel, additional work that the critics I respond to do, because the contextualizing is hitting on different cultural touch points that frame the argument.
Beautiful. Yeah, we have about 5 more minutes before I'll be handing it back over to our host. But there was one more question that I thought I would sort of share with everyone to get your thoughts. And this is from Jordan Stewart. And he simply is asking, or she, forgive me if it's a she, is simply asking, how do you decide if you are an aspiring creative and you want to make change in the world? How do you decide whether or not to become an artist or a critic or a producer?
I think you have to. I think you have to go with what it is that you're, as they say, most comfortable with. That you can actually do rather than aspire to. For example, if you want to be a producer, are you willing to put your quote own money into the production? Are you capable of doing that? Is it easier to instead, as has been said, hone your craft at online or at a lower level and then move up? Making that decision is, gee whiz, I guess that's obviously very personal, and it's financial, and it is well, yeah, I would just say it can be a financial decision also.
I think that was the best answer, because you can want to be a producer, but if you don't have the ability to raise money, that's probably not going to be the thing.
I don't know. I think Lisa might have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's all different kinds of, of producers. There are creative producers who are valued for their ability to work with the talent and to shape the vision. There are producers who, are solely focused on raising funds. So, I mean, there's many ways that one can be a part of a producing team that go beyond solely raising funds. But what I think is so important in this space is patience. For all of us here, we didn't just add water and have established this great press, your wonderful book on Ota Benga, like Marcia's work, like all of you, I have seen doing the work for years and years. So you must have patience, but you also have to have joy.
Yeah.
And those are, and be responsible, responsible to your community, to your health, to your, your way of living. It's a hearty mix that we dance with, but I think we are proof positive that you can do it.
Right.
Wow.
It does go back to knowing what it entails to do whatever it is that you want to do. Like, what does it take? And then, as you say, Lisa, you got to do the work, and it is work. There's a lot of it. Yeah.
And a spirit of service.
Yeah.
The spirit of service. That's what's really important. The spirit of service. When I am a theater geek, but I also love Black theater, and I do whatever it is that I believe that I could do to push forward Black theater, to make sure that it is part of our lives. As going to a theater production, my goal is to make that as natural as breathing. You know, to go to the theater, you breathe, you go to the theater.
Vincent, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I would say there are a couple of things. If you're the kind of person who's asking that question about deciding, that might mean that you want to do multiple things. And I would say, and that's how I've been my whole life. And I would say to you, and it's not a joke or anything, but I would say the first step is like, get a job. Because I freelanced for a long time and I was, working on fiction, working on criticism, doing things. And the reason I was able to do all those things, try to find a place where I could work out of love, out of service, all these things, was that I could say yes to only the things that I wanted to do because I had a job. And I could therefore really investigate what it is that moved me to want to produce my work. And it also then trains the people that you're working with to say, no, that's what they want to do. They don't want to just be, whatever, this broad kind of thing. But I would say that there are so many people who are, again, this idea of community, they're working on all sides of things where maybe you try to do some criticism because criticism helps you, by the way, develop a sense of form that will be helpful for you when you are trying to make art. One of my favorite critics, and now she's, starting her career as a filmmaker, is this young woman. She just graduated from college. Her name is Taylor Montague, and she's, on Twitter. She's done little critical pieces everywhere, and she just did a short film that's now been in a bunch of festivals. It's called In Sudden Darkness, and it's about the New York City blackout of whatever year that was, 2003. So there are, you can, I think wherever you start to work really is a beginning, and it marks your entrance into a community where you can then look at what people are doing and see, this is careers, as Lisa was saying, the thing about doing the work, they're not just tracks, they're experiments. And once you take a step forward, then you look around and you make another decision and you get there and you look around. I think the great trap is to, I think of yourself as like on a road to glory or whatever, that you need to being afraid of the first step because you've somehow gone wrong, but that's not how life works. That's not how art works. And the further along you get, the broader your frame of reference, and you have more people to ask. So I would say just follow your interests, follow your joys and your love.
Wow, that's where you start is the beginning. That's a wonderful way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Well, we have now actually run out of time, unfortunately. This has been amazing. What a great conversation. I want to thank all the panelists, Vincent Cunningham and Lisa Cortez and Marcia Pendleton and Pamela Newkirk. Thank you for your insights. I'm going to send this back to Wallace Ford to close us out because we are on a bit of a time frame for the next panel that's beginning at 12:30. Again, thank you all. This was fantastic.
Okay, well, thank you again. I guess if we were in person, we'd ask everybody to give the panelists a great round of applause, and of course our moderator, Bridgette Davis. So thank all of you very much, and really appreciate the presentations and the discussion that's been had. I know all of us learned quite a bit. And so at this point, as I said, if this was the award ceremony, there'd be music playing, and then we'd say, well, okay, our next set of activities involves, well, there's a couple of things. I've got some work to do here. One is that please visit the Center for Black Literature website, which is centerforblackLiterature.org. And if you have the occasion to do so and the inclination to do so, you can click on the Donate Here button so that we can continue to support the Center for Black Literature. And also, there's a virtual marketplace as part of this. And, we want to make sure we support the people who write the books and sell the books and our various vendors who've been with us for so many years. We're going to take a break now and return at 1 p.m. I'm also asked to remind you to please complete the evaluation form that you received when you registered. This is an important part of our continuing to try to always get better. The next panel coming up at 1 p.m. Will examine how hip hop and popular culture have influenced and shaped many of the popular plays, films, and television shows that are developed. And so I'm sure it's going to be another great panel. Again, thank you, Bridgette Davis, and thank you to all the other panelists. I think this is the part where I'm told that we're supposed to sign off. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wallace. I forgot to thank David Greaves, and I want to make sure I do that as our sponsor. Thanking him.
Absolutely. I thought I heard you do that, but
yeah,
I
I
guess
thought I had, but I think
yeah.
maybe I had.
There's no need, no problem thanking him twice. Right?
Okay. All right.
That's very good. That's
Bye,
very
guys.
good. Okay, I think this is the part where we say see you later, and we'll see you back at 1 p.m.
Great.
And